On the 29th of July 1984, a Douglas DC-9 transport aircraft took off from the Venezuelan capital of Caracas for the Dutch Caribbean island of Curaçao in the Netherlands Antilles. With 5 crewmen and 82 passengers on board, the DC-9 gained altitude and headed out over the Caribbean Sea, where, not long into its flight, 2 men armed with pistols got out of their seats, forced their way into the cockpit, and seized control over the aircraft. Held at gunpoint, the pilot was ordered first to fly to the island of Margarita, then on to Trinidad and Tobago, before finally heading west to the Dutch island of Aruba in the evening of the 29th of July. Here, the 2 armed men issued an ultimatum to the Venezuelan government, outlining that, unless they were given $5 million, a helicopter and fuel, they would blow up the DC-9 and all 87 passengers and crewmen on board. After issuing this ultimatum, the hijackers instructed the pilot to get the plane airborne once again and fly to the original destination of Curaçao, which was reached just before midday on the 30th of July. On arrival at Curaçao International Airport, the hijackers agreed to release 6 of the passengers in return for food and water. However, although this was seen as a major step in defusing the situation, the 2 armed men were becoming increasingly agitated that their demands were not being met, and not only did they step up their threats, but a concerning radio transmission was received from the pilot, who whispered the following: "I cannot talk long because the hijacker has a gun pointing at me almost continuously. The other one is standing in the back with a bomb which they will explode if you don't give in to their demands." With the pilot confirming that there was a bomb on board, the Venezuelan government, with assistance from their Dutch, Trinidadian and American counterparts, began drawing up a contingency plan to regain control over the DC-9 through the use of force. As part of this plan, a detachment of Venezuelan commandos was deployed to Curaçao to begin training and familiarising themselves with the layout of the aircraft. Supporting them in this phase was a small group of US soldiers who had flown in on the 30th of July to provide technical assistance to the Venezuelan troops. According to the US Department of Defense, the American soldiers are operating in a strictly advisory role and are deployed out of Fort Bragg in North Carolina, suggesting that they belong to the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, or more commonly known as Delta Force. By the evening of the 30th of July 1984, the preparations for storming the Douglas DC-9 had been finalised, and an assault team of 12 Venezuelan commandos took up a position on the runway ready for the green light to move in. At the same time, to ensure that the DC-9 didn't leave the airport, fire trucks were moved in front of its path, whilst Venezuelan snipers shot out its tyres. There then followed a tense few hours in which the negotiating team tried to end the crisis peacefully, until around 0150 on the 31st of July, when the hijackers broke off all communications and demanded that the aircraft leave Curaçao. At that point, the wife of one of the hijackers agreed to replace a pregnant woman aboard the plane so that she could talk directly with her husband and encourage him to surrender. However, as she approached the DC-9 under escort by the Venezuelan commandos, the doors of the aircraft were suddenly flung open as dozens of passengers piled out of the cabin in an apparent uprising against the 2 armed men. One of the passengers, Nancy Perez-Gentil, later recalled, "Both men were at the front of the plane, and all of a sudden we heard people screaming and running towards the front. Me and my husband grabbed our children and ran for the back door and got the back door open and ran out. Everybody was panicking." Immediately as the passengers started to scramble out of the aircraft, the 12-man commando assault team rushed forward, and while some helped move the civilians to safety, the others made their way up to and stormed into the aircraft. Within seconds, the enemy threat had been neutralised as the Venezuelan commandos shot and killed both of the hijackers. Remarkably, despite the intense nature of the situation, no other casualties, either to civilians or the Venezuelan military, were sustained, a testament to the skill and professionalism displayed by the commandos, who were not only operating in a confined environment, but also had to deal with armed hostiles and up to 80 civilians running towards them. Thus, by 0230 on the 31st of July 1984, around 36 hours after the crisis had begun, the Douglas DC-9 transport aircraft, which belonged to the Venezuelan Aeropostale, has successfully been retaken. To this day, exactly why the hijackers wanted a helicopter and $5 million is unknown.